Hello, my name is Caleb King, and this video is going to be on the influence of religion in early Georgia. The first European country to have influence in what is now Georgia was Spain. Spanish influence started with Guale village and Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón. Spain was interested in North America for the three G's: God, gold, and glory, converting Native Americans to Christianity, the Spanish monarch's treasury with gold, and seeking personal fortune and fame were the goals of the Spanish conquistadors. Spanish influence has three periods. We have 1526 with Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón, 1540 with Hernando de Soto, and then the mission period that took place after that. Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón arrived in what is now Georgia in 1526, over 200 years before Oglethorpe founded the colony of Georgia. This represents another historic moment, as this was the first time that enslaved Africans set foot on what is now the United States. Ayllón established San Miguel de Guadalupe, or Guale Village, on what is now Sapelo Sound in present-day McIntosh County. He sailed north from Hispaniola during the summer and first landed in present-day South Carolina. Meeting no natives, he traveled south along the coast before settling in Georgia. To help establish the colony, Ayllón brought with him the very first group of slaves. But hunger, disease, and conflict with the natives all took their toll, and the settlement survived for only 3 months. Had the settlement endured, Georgia's history might have been very different because of the Spanish presence established on September 29th in 1526. The second period of Spanish influence is marked by conquistador Hernando de Soto. De Soto was on a mission to find gold. His exploration started in Florida and would weave its way through Georgia, South Carolina, and then eventually back down into Georgia. Hernando de Soto would make his way all the way to the Mississippi, which is where he would eventually end up passing away. De Soto's impact on Georgia was not necessarily a positive one, as the majority of his time was spent spreading diseases or having conflicts with Native Americans in his quest for gold. De Soto does get credit for introducing pigs to North America, as his group of men and his explorers brought many of them with him on his way through his journey. The most successful period of Spanish influence in what is now Georgia was the Mission period. This was from 1568 to 1684. It was during this period that Spain built several missions, or churches, on the barrier islands as well as on the mainland. Spanish missions were located near Cumberland Island, St. Catherine's Island, and near Okefenokee Swamp. Missions built on the mainland were located as far inland as the current cities of Valdosta and Lumber City, Mississippian towns, so the priests and friars could achieve their primary goal: the conversion of the American Indians to Christianity, specifically Catholicism. Consequently, the missions encouraged the American Indians to embrace Spanish political and economic systems. As an example, to show allegiance to the Spanish, unmarried American Indian males were required to work in St. Augustine for several months out of the year, causing considerable change to the American Indian society. The close contact with the Spanish brought disease and death to the American Indians, who were increasingly disturbed by the changes to their own culture. By the mid-1600s, the Spanish mission system was crumbling. British influence based in the South Carolina colony often stirred American Indians to raid the missions, and by the 1680s, coastal missions were abandoned by the Spanish. A pirate raid in 1684 pushed the remainder of the mission American Indians into Florida, ending the Spanish mission period in Georgia. British influence in Georgia started by creating the 13th colony. This was done as the brainchild of James Oglethorpe, who would appeal to King George II with the idea of a new colony. They wanted this colony to be established for 3 reasons: philanthropy, economics, and defense. King George II would officially sign the charter in April of 1732, and in June the council would affix its seal and hand it over to Georgia trustees, 21 trustees that were led by James Oglethorpe. This officially created the colony of Georgia. The charter granted colonists the rights of Englishmen, but did not allow local government, and although it granted religious liberty, it banned Roman Catholics and Jews, although Jews would be among the earliest of the Georgia settlers. The trustees would govern Georgia for 20 years. Upon arriving in what is now Georgia, James Oglethorpe came into contact with a Yamacraw Indian chief named Chief Tomochichi. Chief Tomochichi would use a translator by the name of Mary Musgrove to be able to communicate back and forth with James Oglethorpe, and together these three would work together to establish the colony of Georgia and create the settlement of Savannah on Yamacraw Bluff. Tomochichi would go back to England with James Oglethorpe to meet with the rest of the trustees. Tomochichi was such an influential member in the establishment of Georgia that his grave is marked in downtown Savannah to this day with a large granite stone put in its place. James Oglethorpe was the only one of the 21 trustees that would actually step foot in the colony of Georgia. Though they were originally banned in the Charter of 1732, Jewish settlers would arrive roughly 5 months after James Oglethorpe and the colonists made landfall in what is now Georgia, where they were setting up the settlement of Savannah. The reason that Oglethorpe allowed these Jewish settlers to settle in Georgia, violating the ban that was put in place by the trustees, is due to a breakout of illness that was happening around the time of their arrival. Dr. Samuel Nunez was a Jewish physician who the Georgia founder credited with saving many of the lives of the colonists that were suffering during that time period. The Jews and their descendants would play a central role in the development of our state after the first Jewish settlers arrived in July 11th, 1733 with Dr. Samuel Nunez. Of the 43 Jewish settlers that arrived, 34 were Sephardic Jews of Spanish and Portuguese heritage. The rest were Ashkenazic of German descent. A Torah scroll they brought with them survives to this day at the Congregation Mikveh Israel in Savannah, which was created in 1735, 2 years after their arrival. It is the oldest Jewish congregation in the South and the third oldest in the country. Without these Jewish settlers and Dr. Samuel Nunez, the colony of Georgia very well could have failed within 5 months of attempting to be established in Savannah. The second diverse religious group that arrived in Georgia was the Salzburgers. The Catholic Archbishop of Salzburg expelled German Protestants from the region in present-day Austria in 1731, and England's King George II offered them refuge in the new colony of Georgia. 300 Salzburgers, following Pastor Johann Martin Boltzius, accepted the invitation. General Oglethorpe greeted the exiles in Savannah, and they traveled 25 miles upriver and founded the town of Ebenezer in what is now Effingham County. The original location would not prove to be a good location for them, and they would relocate and create the town of New Ebenezer. The Salzburgers' deep spirituality, strong work ethic, and independent spirit served the community well. They thrived for years before the American Revolution and built the first water-driven grist mill in Georgia and established the first Sunday school and the first orphanage. The community suffered British occupation during the Revolution, but the Jerusalem Church, founded by Boltzius, still stands and is a gathering place for the descendants of the exiled German Protestants. According to the Georgia Salzburger Society, the Jerusalem Lutheran Church is the oldest continuous worshiping Lutheran church in America. Established in 1732, located along the Savannah River in Rincon, Georgia, the church still uses the original church bells. The first Sunday school in Georgia was held in 1734, and the first orphanage was built in 1737. The church was built from bricks made of clay from the area from 1767 to 1769. The walls of the church are 21 inches thick, and some of the original panes of glass are still in the windows. The Salzburgers had interactions with the Jewish settlers in the colony of Georgia and were concerned about their Christianity. Letters from Oglethorpe to numerous people discuss these interactions between them. A third diverse group to arrive in Georgia was the Highland Scots. The Highland Scots were among the finest soldiers in the world and had been recruited by General James Oglethorpe to provide a buffer between the English colony of South Carolina and the Spanish in Florida. The group of Scottish Highlanders sailed from Inverness, Scotland, aboard the Prince of Wales, bound for Georgia. They would found New Inverness, later named Darien, 60 miles south of Savannah. The Scots built a fort to replace Fort King George at the mouth of the Altamaha River, which had been abandoned in 1732. The Battle of Bloody Marsh on St. Simon's Island was a part of a global clash of arms between two empires, England and Spain. The two nations were at odds over privateering on the high seas and over borders in Northern America. St. Augustine's governor led 5,000 soldiers on an invasion, and Oglethorpe dug in with less than 1,000 men, among them the Highland Scots, on a bluff on St. Simon's Island overlooking the Frederica River. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Oglethorpe's men repelled two Spanish attacks with minimal casualties. Other influential people that arrived in the colony of Georgia were John and Charles Wesley. Charles Wesley is quoted as saying, "About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I first set foot on St. Simon's Island, and immediately my spirit was revived." Ordained ministers of the Anglican Church, the Wesleys joined General James Oglethorpe, founder and first governor of Georgia, on his second trip to Georgia. John Wesley is recognized as the founder of Methodism. His brother Charles is remembered as a prolific poet and a writer of over 6,000 hymns. John Wesley was authorized by the trustees of the colony of Georgia to perform religious and ecclesiastical offices in the colony. Charles Wesley was to be Secretary of Indian Affairs and to perform religious duties at Frederica. Both had some bitter experiences and believed their ministry in Georgia was a failure. However, history has proved otherwise. Their work in Georgia is called the Second Rise of Methodism, the first being the Holy Club in England. The Wesley Memorial Garden is a place where people may experience the same revival of the Spirit felt by Charles Wesley when he arrived on St. Simon's Island, and when John Wesley felt his heart strangely warmed during his Aldersgate experience in London. The overall impact of the religious influence in Georgia had huge bearings on the success of the colony. Without the Spanish coming through with their missions and beginning to have Native Americans have contact with them and be able to try to convert them to Catholicism, we don't know if they would have been as welcoming to James Oglethorpe when he arrived in the area to establish the colony of Savannah. James Oglethorpe's own personal faith and his desire to have the colony succeed is why the Jewish settlers were allowed to settle in the colony of Georgia. Without the Jewish settlers and Dr. Samuel Nunez, there would have been no further settlement of the colony of Georgia because the colonists were dying too fast, and the Jewish Dr. Samuel Nunez saved them. Without the influence of the Salzburgers, who came to the colony of Georgia seeking religious freedom, trying to escape that religious persecution that was taking place in Austria, we would not have had as successful of a farming industry because they were huge farmers and had a huge impact on the agriculture industry in Georgia. Without the Highland Scots being able to defend the colony and defend the other 12 colonies against the Spanish in Florida, we don't know if the colony would have been able to succeed or not. The influence that these groups had definitely shaped the early years of Georgia and helped set the colony up for success moving forward.